Osama bin Laden, the former head of Al-Qaeda, had been given a code name by U.S. forces, Geronimo. This was because of his obstinate elusiveness. This has been the Apache tribe's ongoing importance. Their leader, Geronimo, is also accountable for making people jump out of aeroplanes and yell the Geronimo scream. Who are the Apaches and how did they operate in the Wild West? Why are they still infamous amongst the North American tribes? The term Apache is a collective noun that refers to a number of indigenous North American tribes. Hollywood westerns help make this name memorable in American history. 6 major tribes made up the Apache: the Chiricahua, Jicarilla, Lipan, Mescalero, Western Apache, and Kiowa. The Zuni word Apache, which means enemy, is most likely the source of the Spanish word Apache. All of these tribes' names are also distorted versions of their original regional names. Only after the arrival of the European settlers did the term Apache and the rest of these terms come into use. We won't go into detail about each tribe's particulars here to keep things brief. Some regard the Navajo as distant relatives of the Apache tribes. Opinions diverge, though, because the term Apache has a hazy definition. In the southwest of the U.S., there were numerous Apache tribes. However, their past tells a fascinating tale. Most of these tribes were present in the northern plains during prehistoric times. They migrated from the northwest Pacific coast to the southwest between the 13th and 15th centuries, according to anthropological evidence. As they moved eastward, they avoided settling in the canyon lands and instead chose the southern plains of Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. We are aware that the Apache split into eastern and western groups following the migration. Migration may have caused this division because more people would have followed along. It would have been possible for the tribe's genetic makeup to change. Some people believe that these divisions had existed for a very long time, resulting in numerous groups occupying various areas, whether they were different from the start or developed as a result of time. As the Athabascan language family is found in the northern, coastal, and southwestern territories, these groups spoke Athabascan languages. They aid historians in analyzing the Apache's migratory patterns. We have made significant progress in understanding these local tribes, as seen in other cultures of the New World, thanks to the resurgence of interest in the topic and the advancement of archaeological techniques. They held beliefs and ideas very dissimilar from those of the Old World. People migrating because of ecological conditions and climate change was fairly common even in Mesoamerican cultures. Archaeologists have a sizable amount of materials, goods, and homes that the Athabascan-speaking people left behind. Modern understanding of their culture has also benefited from more exposure and curiosity. The vast majority of Apache people lived in large extended families akin to those in Asia. The Western Apache, however, were distinct in one way. Family units followed the lineage of the families as opposed to the males. So one of the most dangerous tribes in the world were feminist? How cool is that? The daughter and her husband shared a home with the woman's parents. Except for a few, most tribes adhered to this custom. The tribes had teepee homes. In the summer, they would remove the roofs from their homes. They engaged in trade with other tribes and engaged in animal and plant hunting. Reading was a practical way to get clothing and food. They wore mostly animal hides with decorations. A chief would naturally rise to the top of the extended family's natural hierarchy. The Apache tribes had an unconventional view of tribes and groups that frequently engaged in disputes and wars with one another. They had long been content to fight each other, but soon a single foreign force would threaten their existence and encroach on their territory. The Spanish had started their sea voyages and were establishing themselves on the new continent. In the 16th century, the Apache were first encountered by the Spanish. They had encountered the Apache during the Coronado expedition in 1540. However, the relationship did not start to deteriorate until the latter half of the 16th century. The area had been colonized by the Spanish in 1610, and Santa Fe itself had been established. The Apache established a successful trade alliance with the Pueblos soon after they arrived in the Southwest. Native tribes from the Southwest's Pueblo region built long-lasting structures. The Spanish in Arizona and New Mexico found Pueblos. Even though they weren't entirely nomadic, the Apache are distinct from the Pueblos with an urban mindset. They were among the first indigenous tribes to begin riding horses. and the average Apache dwelling only required 3 days to construct. They were able to live an increasingly nomadic lifestyle thanks to these traits. The two groups of tribes got along well, despite their differences. Spanish settlers sought a piece of the action and divided the tribes by sowing the seeds of discontent. Some eastern tribes moved to the northern Mexico and Texas after collaborating with the Europeans. However, the Spanish would eventually enslave these people and use them as free labor. However, there were complicated dynamics between the natives and the visitors. Native tribes may be friendly with some colonizer groups, but at war with others and vice versa. However, as the Europeans made progress in their religion, the Apache failed to make friends with the Spanish, Mexicans, and Americans. The Spanish could not defend the villages of the Pueblo against the Apache during a drought in the 17th century. Spanish missionaries persisted in their work, but a 5-year drought and approaching raids did not inspire faith in their god. The Pueblo Rebellion of 1680 served as the solution to this problem. However, some Pueblos would ultimately find comfort among the Navajos. For a while, there had been a deterioration in the Apaches' relations with the Spanish. The Spanish attracted various tribes and bands with their teachings as they carried out their missionary work. The Spanish mission's naive idealism led them to think that they could get along with anyone. This idea was clearly flawed. The tribes and groups continued to compete, making it impossible for the Spanish to support one without alienating another. The Spanish missions would fall victim to raids and hostilities in the 18th century, particularly Santa Cruz de San Saba and San Lorenzo de la Santa Cruz. The Apache soon encountered the Comanche, another dangerous adversary. The Cynthia and Parker tale may be the part of the Comanche that people today remember the most. The Searchers, which John Ford later turned into a movie, is still regarded as a fantastic book, despite its political issues. In a Hollywood production, John Wayne played a man on the run from the Comanche who had kidnapped a young girl. This portrayal of Comanches in popular culture is just one. They were a tough group of the frontier era and were made into villains in many Western-themed films and television shows. By the middle of the 19th century, guerrilla warfare was in full swing, and the Comanche had dispersed the Apache tribes across the country. Eastern Apache were forced by the Comanche to leave the southern plains and joined forces with previously adversarial groups for their survival. Most of these tribes eventually settled in New Mexico. Following the signing of a treaty between the Spanish and the Comanche in 1786, both parties started to hunt down various Apache tribes in the area. They had eradicated the Apache tribes from the southwest plains by the end of the 18th century. The region was able to calm down after the capture and coerced agreement to maintain peace. Mexico gained its independence in 1821, and by the 1840s, tensions between the United States and Mexico were growing. The Mexican-American War broke out in 1846 as a result of the U.S. annexing Texas from Mexico. Texas was seen as a rebellious state by Mexico, but the residents of Texas believed they were in charge. Following their discussion with the Mexicans, the Apache decided to ally themselves with the U.S., providing safe passage for American soldiers through their territory. The Americans, lacking Spanish intelligence, asserted their dominance over the lands after Mexico ceded territory to the U.S. This situation persisted until the 1850s, when American settlers in search of gold incited the Apache to start the Apache Wars. The settlers imposed their rule over the territory, using mines, ranches, and livestock as reminders. Despite a settlement between the government and the local Apaches, settlers persisted in their presence. Initially, Apache settlers were friendly with the Americans, but as they gathered land, raiding parties began targeting them. One day, Koki, a native leader, was falsely accused of kidnapping a boy. Coaches and his group were taken hostage, and allied tribes encircled the Americans. The Americans killed the captives and detainees, while the coaches managed to escape. In 1849, American forces launched search and destroy operations, but locals struggled to keep up with American technology and military tactics. The tribal Apache faced a final defeat when American troops forced Geronimo to surrender. Geronimo, a powerful Apache warrior, oversaw significant uprisings against the U.S. government's hegemony. The Navajos surrendered in 1863, and other groups followed suit. In the early 1870s, some Apache families continued raiding, leading to the 19th century's assimilation programs. Today, the largest Apache populations are found in Oklahoma, Arizona, California, and New Mexico. Well, this is it for today. If you'd like to know more about the native Indian tribes, then subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon.